Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Max Verstappen is on the verge of securing his third championship this weekend, but the question has been raised, when that is done and dusted, will he at any point from now to the end of the season decide to help out Sergio Perez in any way in his fight for second in the Drivers' Championship over Lewis Hamilton? The prevailing opinion seems to be there is no way Verstappen will give up any points at all, even to help his teammate out in that potential fight for second place. Is this the right approach from Verstappen? Does it mean the writing is very much on the wall for Sergio Perez? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Thanks as well for 30,000 subs we got there yesterday. So massively appreciate all the growth over the last couple of weeks. Lots of news today. Firstly, this is quite an interesting one. Andretti are powering ahead in preparing their 11th Team F1 entry. That's not for sure it's going to happen yet. F1 can still say no. They would have a hard time saying no. There's been lots of talk about it. But Andretti are saying they're going to be in. They're hiring technical guys. They've got their technical director. They've got their chief designer. They've got their head of aero. And these guys have been in the works for some time on that 2026 project. So it's quite clear they intend to be a competitive outfit when they arrive into the sport. I don't really think that anyone can dispute that in theory they should. They might not be, but in theory they should be able to put up a fight on the grid. So it's not the fact that they will fall outside of the 107% threshold that's going to keep them out of the sport. It's commercial stuff, as and when those opportunities might get turned down. Also, this from Aston Martin, they've confirmed that they will be entering the FIA World Endurance Championship from 2025 with the absolutely stunning Valkyrie hypercar, of course, co-designed, or maybe mainly designed by Adrian Newey, of course. This is kind of interesting just because of the driver situation at Aston Martin is in flux. It's somewhat dynamic. Alonso isn't happy with the direction their current car is taking in the Formula 1 side. Maybe he does one more year, maybe he does two, I don't know. But at some point, Alonso, you'd think, has got to retire. And he's obviously been very keen to do Le Mans again, and maybe this is an option. There's maybe also a chance they think, you know what, Stroll, how about you go and drive in the WEC and we can get another driver into the F1 car, maybe. I know that some have said, oh, you know, what if you get like Alonso and Vettel, you know, they reunite under Aston Martin to drive in the Endurance Championship. That's an interesting possibility as well. This is another quite positive update, I think, from Giuliano De Chessa as to the increase in testing the teams are going to be allowed to do going forwards. Since, you know, over the last few years, there's been a massive reduction in testing for junior drivers and for the teams themselves. They used to be able to kind of do as much as they wanted back in the day. Nowadays, even on the filming days, they're only allowed to do 100 kilometers, whereas now that's going to be 200 kilometers. So they're slowly reducing the restrictions on the amount of testing that can be done on the cars, which, to be honest, in a cost cap situation, I think is probably a good thing. It also means the junior drivers get more chances in these cars. And as has always been the case, I believe, from January the 1st, cars from 2 years ago can now get used for that purpose. So Mercedes will be hauling the W13 out of the garage, and yeah, their juniors can enjoy the spine-crushing sensations of that car down the straight. Interesting reports of drama as well emerging at Alpine. There's been various reports as to whether, you know, how true is this, because, you know, the teams can't always necessarily stay in the same hotel. But it's Alpine. Would you be surprised if there's internal drama there? You know, I think it's pretty much goes without saying between even the drivers at times, certainly with what happened with Otmar, and there was even rumours that like Renault's CEO turned up to the office recently and made like an impassioned speech. They need to get back to the front of the grid and all this stuff. And Otmar, it seemed, got fired for saying that, well, I'm not really sure in this current level of investment and direction that we're going to be able to win races in the 4 or 5 years that you want to. He got fired for that. And now there's rumours that the French and the English personnel at Alpine are divided somewhat. I mean, this is a classic story that goes back, you know, millennia, really. But, yeah, apparently there's problems at Alpine. And is there a surprise there's problems at Alpine? Absolutely not. Let's talk, though, about Red Bull, Checo, Max, potential conflicts, because it was not too far after this point last season in November, right, when the Brazilian Grand Prix happens, and there was lots of talking points between the two of the drivers. At that time, though, Checo was in a fight for P2 in the Drivers' Championship, and he finds himself in a similar position this time around. Of course, Perez is looking to come back stronger this weekend. They're now world champions, Red Bull officially constructors, and Max will be the Drivers' World Championship this weekend, unless he gets no point and Perez wins everything, basically. It's probably going to happen on Saturday during the sprint. So Checo's obviously looking to bounce back here. There's been lots of talks about Perez's underperformance. What should happen to him? Is Ricciardo going to come in mid-season at the end of, like, during next year, basically? Should they get rid of him, put Lawson in the car? Perez has been taking a lot of criticism, and you can understand why. Then you got to wonder, would Max help Perez out here, right? As teammates, you'd think maybe there might be opportunities from now to the end of the year for Max to give Sergio a helping hand. Whether that's give him a bit of DRS in a certain battle, whether that's, let's say a safety car happens and it puts Max behind Perez, maybe just holding position, right, rather than going for the move. But the fact of the matter is that's not in Verstappen's nature. And I know that we've seen in previous years, even the likes of Schumacher, right? Maybe when he'd get the championship, he'd help out Barrichello a little bit to get there as well. But, at that time, usually they were going to be, their car was so good that it didn't really matter that much for Schumi. But for Verstappen, I think his mindset even goes one step further. Like, I highly doubt that he would be making any concessions at all, given that he's also got some records to set. He's already going to break the record for the most laps led in a season. He wants to probably break the record for the most points in a season and most wins in a season, wants to push that as far as he possibly can. And, you'd think as a result of that, he's not going to let anything up for Perez. Is he going to let Perez win a race if he could potentially win on merit just because Perez wants to get P2 in the drivers? Probably not. And that's been the discussion here. There was a podcast that came out as well, kind of speculating on this. Natalie Pinkham and also Pedro Della Rosa, of course, who's basically an ambassador for Aston Martin, saying that at the end of the day, giving wins away for the help of taking your teammate is not necessarily good for the team, and it's not good for Max. And Max definitely wouldn't want to do that, right? And also, how much does seconds mean anyway? The interesting part for Red Bull is, I know that they have said they would like to finish P1, P2 in the drivers. They've won the constructors. They'll win the drivers. Well, they've already won the drivers, actually, because only Perez or Max can win it at this point. Obviously, it's going to be Max. So they've already won that as well. So does it really matter if they get P1, P2 in the drivers? Probably not, although they've never done that before. So it's kind of something they would like to have. And for Perez, getting P2 is frankly a necessity, right? Would Max, potentially help him out if he has to slow up a car, or let's say Max actually goes through some sort of hardship, as I say, maybe gets unlucky with the safety car or gets some damage or something, has to pit and comes out further behind. Maybe there'd be a scenario in one of the 6 races to go where he could do something to help out Perez, maybe give him a tow on a qualifying lap, stuff like this that could be done. Will Max do any of that? I think it's highly unlikely that he would. And we saw this last year in Brazil. And this is kind of just shows really Verstappen's mindset when he collided with Hamilton early on and he was behind Perez and he maybe thought he could chase further up the pack. Perez let him through. Maybe Max would have overtaken anyway, but, Perez let him through. He went to fight ahead. He couldn't get the move done. And historically, when this has occurred, for example, Hamilton and Bottas in Hungary 2017, Hamilton slowed down an awful lot to let Bottas back through and take the podium that day during a potentially interesting title fight that year. So that was great sportsmanship from Hamilton at the time, and, that was in a position where the championship was on the line. At this point, the championship was done and dusted. Verstappen was the world champion. He could have given up P6 or whatever it was to give that back to Perez and gain a couple more points to Perez in the championship in his fight with Charles Leclerc for P2 in the drivers, but he decided not to. So I can't imagine, he decided not to last year in Brazil. I can't imagine there's any way that he's going to give up any points to Perez this season, given what happened last time. And we also know that Perez after the race was fuming about this and said, oh, well, it shows who Verstappen really is, this type of stuff, and that ruffled some feathers. And then we heard that the belief of Verstappen was that he thought that Perez crashed deliberately in Monaco in the season, and therefore that was revenge in some sense. So maybe you think, oh, well, that's all behind them now, and therefore Max is going to help him out going forwards. But I highly doubt it. And last year's championship, Verstappen won with 454 points, then Leclerc, then Perez, then Russell. So there was 3 points separating the two of them. It was a close battle, and in the end, Leclerc got the job done. And okay, if Verstappen and Perez had swapped positions, I think it wouldn't have mattered actually in terms of points. But it was the principle behind it rather than anything else in theory. So this season, these are the championship standings. Verstappen's at 400 already, Perez at 223 only, and Hamilton at 190. So realistically, even though Ferrari are making progress, as are, of course, McLaren and Norris, no one else, especially with Alonso's Aston Martin not looking so good, it's really between these two to get P2, and it's possible that Perez could lose this to Hamilton. He'd have to have a stinker, to be honest. 33 points is a big deal, and if Perez can't get the job done here on his own, then I don't know what he can't complain about Verstappen not helping him if he can't hold on to this lead in that car that is faster than the rest of the field. So he should be able to hold on, and it would take something pretty special, I think, from Mercedes and Hamilton to close that gap anyway, and Perez to have a few shocking races. And in the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't matter that much anyway because Red Bull have already won the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, do you see Verstappen ever yielding any points to help his teammate out in any respect? Even if Red Bull were fighting for the championship in the Constructors, I don't know if Verstappen would give up points of his own accrual to help out a teammate. Maybe he would, but Verstappen just has that like relentless, ruthless energy that he wants to win absolutely everything and secure every single point. We saw it earlier in the season, right, in Austria or even in Saudi Arabia when he was on the radio being like, "What's the fastest lap, GP?" And I think it was GP was like, "Oh, we're not interested about that at the moment." And then he was like, "Yeah, well, I care about it. I want that point." And he did the same thing in Austria when he pitted right at the end because he had the gap for it and then set the fastest lap of the race. So, he's been ruthless all season long. He wants to win the race. He wants to get the fastest lap. And I don't expect that to stop for pretty much anything, even his own teammate in this scenario. And he also made this comment recently that, I'm not afraid of losing, but I do hate losing. And okay, every driver hates losing, but Max takes this level of ruthlessness to another level. He's a good fit for Red Bull, really, because, Max is ruthless. Red Bull are ruthless in their application of things as well. And if you're Sergio Perez, you've got to think, well, I'm struggling this year relative to Max. I mean, big time after the first few races of the season. His qualifying actually isn't technically as bad as Albon's or Gasly's, but you've got to consider this as being done in relative to the competition, a far superior car, even than Albon and Gasly had back then, when at least then you could usually consider the Mercedes would be 1-2 or, ahead of them, whereas now that's clearly not been the case for the last couple of seasons. And then there's pressure from Daniel Ricciardo. Max isn't going to give you any helping hands, right, to get you, to secure your spot, because if Perez does get overtaken by Hamilton, it's tough to imagine that he's going to hold on to that seat for next year, and I don't think that Max really cares whether Perez is in the seat or not, to be honest, and maybe part of Max wants someone else in their car because maybe they could fight him closer, maybe it'll keep Verstappen on his toes a bit more, but also they would have an easier time in the Constructors, and Verstappen's said multiple times this season, I've basically just won this title on my own, haven't I? This Constructors, and I didn't necessarily even need Checo to help me out on it. Just one interesting thing for you guys to close out the video. Hamilton tweeted this out yesterday, born proven, with the old school yellow helmet when he was younger, and then, of course, the purple helmet. And there was a lot of people saying it's time to bring back the purple. I don't really care so much about the helmets that the drivers use. I used to kind of enjoy back in the day when they would have their helmet design. Nowadays, it's like every other race, they've got some special helmet they're putting on. But yeah, with Hamilton, it's a little bit more interesting because he used the yellow with Ayrton Senna in his youth, and then when he was first coming into the sport. And then, of course, they had that era when, as even he goes on to say in a since deleted tweet, interestingly, didn't expect so much purple helmet love. So he might have realized that people actually really quite like this purple helmet, and I guess for a lot of people it's kind of iconic, right? Because it was Hamilton, the peak of his powers, the W11, the purple helmet, the black car, and it all kind of aligned quite nicely for the dominant season he had in 2020, for example. So there's quite a lot of people that have said maybe it's time to bring that back for next year, and it was a good look and a good aesthetic. So yeah, we'll see what Hamilton decides to do, whether he steps away from the yellow again and runs it back with purple for the new season, because he's made it clear that he's still going to be around in the sport for quite some time to come. But very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.